What if the lowest moment of your life turned out to be the very reason you succeeded later? What if bankruptcy, instead of being the end, became the unexpected doorway to your greatest breakthrough? And what if the story of one American entrepreneur shows us that losing everything doesn't mean you're finished? It means you're being prepared for something bigger. Bankruptcy in America often carries a heavy stigma. It's seen as financial ruin, a scarlet letter that marks someone as reckless, irresponsible, or unfit for leadership. Yet history tells a different story. Many of the most successful entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders endured bankruptcy at least once before rising to prominence. The resilience to recover, rebuild, and thrive after such devastation is one of the most powerful demonstrations of mindset in action. The case study we'll explore today captures this spirit perfectly. The story of an American entrepreneur who went from the humiliation of bankruptcy to the triumph of building a lasting legacy. To understand the significance of this story, imagine the scene. The entrepreneur in question had poured his entire life into his first venture. Sleepless nights, endless travel, negotiations, and bold risks were the rhythm of his days. For years, he believed he was on the brink of success. Then, almost overnight, everything collapsed. Market downturns, overextended debts, and critical missteps caught up with him. Creditors circled, assets were seized, the company he had nurtured for years fell apart in front of him. And with it, his reputation seemed to vanish. Friends avoided his calls, partners distanced themselves. Headlines painted him as another failed dreamer who had flown too close to the sun. The emotional toll was brutal. Bankruptcy doesn't just drain bank accounts, it drains confidence. This entrepreneur described waking up in the mornings with a pit in his stomach, wondering if he would ever find a way forward. He had to face not only financial loss, but also the shame of explaining to his family, his employees, and his community that the dream was over. In that moment, it would have been easy, almost natural, to quit forever. To accept that bankruptcy was proof he wasn't cut out for business. Many would have chosen that path, but he didn't. Instead, he made a choice that would redefine his future. He treated bankruptcy as a lesson, not a life sentence. He began by analyzing what had gone wrong. Where had he overreached? Where had pride blinded him to risk? Where had he failed to adapt? He refused to sugarcoat the truth. He acknowledged his mistakes openly, writing them down and committing to never repeat them. That painful clarity became his roadmap. Bankruptcy had stripped him of everything. But in doing so, it left him with something priceless: wisdom. The first key to his breakthrough was humility. Before bankruptcy, he admitted he had been fueled by ego. He wanted to grow faster, impress more people, and chase validation. Afterward, he learned that sustainable success comes not from chasing applause, but from serving real needs. In his second venture, he started small, almost embarrassingly small compared to his first. But he built carefully, with a laser focus on customer value instead of flashy expansion. He remembered how debt had suffocated him, so this time he kept his finances lean and disciplined. Every hire, every expense, every investment had to prove its worth. The second key was resilience in the face of doubt. After bankruptcy, no one believed in him. Banks wouldn't lend, investors wouldn't meet. Even friends hesitated to get involved. He had to build credibility from scratch. That required persistence most of us can barely imagine. He networked tirelessly, knocking on doors, making calls, and presenting his vision again and again until someone was willing to listen. When he finally secured his first small contract in his new venture, he treated it as gold. That one opportunity, nurtured with care and excellence, became the seed of his comeback. The third key was adaptability. He realized that the world was changing faster than he had anticipated in his first venture. To survive this time, he had to be flexible. Instead of clinging to a single vision, he embraced iteration. If customers wanted a different feature, he pivoted. If the market shifted, he adjusted. Bankruptcy had taught him that rigidity is the enemy of resilience. Success belongs to those who can bend without breaking. Slowly, his new company began to grow. What started as a modest operation serving a handful of clients expanded steadily. His reputation, once tarnished, began to rebuild. People admired his determination to rise again after such a public fall. Investors, once skeptical, took notice of his careful management and innovative approach. And eventually, the company that had been born from the ashes of bankruptcy became a national success story. By the time his second venture reached its peak, it was valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. More importantly, it had become a symbol of resilience, a living case study of how failure can become the foundation of greatness. The entrepreneur himself became a sought-after speaker, not because of his riches, but because of his story. He spoke honestly about bankruptcy, about the nights of fear and shame, about the hard lessons that failure carved into his character. And he urged others to see setbacks not as verdicts, but as opportunities for growth. What makes this story so powerful is its universality. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to relate. Bankruptcy is just one form of collapse. For others, it may be a failed relationship, a career setback, a personal mistake that seems impossible to recover from. The details differ, but the principle remains. Failure only defines you if you let it. The resilient mindset chooses to treat failure as feedback, as the painful but priceless tuition of life's school. In America, the legal system itself reflects this belief. Bankruptcy laws exist not just to punish, but to allow people to start fresh. Unlike in some cultures where financial failure permanently ruins reputations, America gives space for reinvention. That legal framework aligns with the cultural ethos of resilience. You can fall, but you can also rise again. The entrepreneur in this case study embodied that ethos fully. He accepted bankruptcy, learned from it, and used it as a launching pad for his breakthrough. For anyone facing setbacks today, his story offers a roadmap. First, own your mistakes. Don't hide from them. Don't sugarcoat them. The clarity you gain will be your compass. Second, start small. After collapse, humility and careful growth are your allies. Focus on delivering real value, not on impressing others. Third, persist even when no one believes in you. Rebuilding credibility takes time, but each small win is a brick in the foundation of your comeback. Fourth, stay adaptable. Don't marry your ego to one plan. Pivot, adjust, and evolve as needed. Finally, remember that resilience is not about avoiding failure, it's about transforming it. Bankruptcy, failure, or defeat of any kind can be the soil in which your greatest success grows. The entrepreneur who went from bankruptcy to breakthrough proved that resilience is the true currency of success. Money can be lost, reputations can be damaged, but resilience, once cultivated, cannot be taken from you. It carries you through storms, guides you through uncertainty, and equips you to build again. So the next time life knocks you down, ask yourself, is this the end, or is this the beginning of my breakthrough? The answer depends not on circumstances, but on mindset. The American story we've explored today shows us that even the most humiliating defeat can become the most powerful turning point. Bankruptcy is not the final word. With resilience, it can be the first word in the story of your greatest success. Bankruptcy is often described as the bottom of the barrel, the lowest point a person can reach in business. It wipes away not only money, but also confidence, credibility, and sometimes even personal relationships. But in America, bankruptcy has also been the foundation of remarkable comebacks. In part 2 of this story, we dive deeper into how one entrepreneur turned the wreckage of financial collapse into the stepping stones of a lasting breakthrough. His journey illustrates the mechanics of resilience, the habits, choices, and mindset shifts that transformed bankruptcy from a death sentence into a rebirth. When the entrepreneur's first venture collapsed, he had to confront the harsh realities of his situation. It wasn't just that his business had failed. He was personally liable for debts that stretched into the millions. The humiliation was public. Creditors were aggressive. Journalists covered the fall with merciless detail. He described the feeling as standing in quicksand, with every attempt to move only dragging me down further. Friends he had celebrated with in better times vanished. His phone stopped ringing. In a culture obsessed with success, bankruptcy branded him as a loser. The turning point began not with a sudden stroke of luck, but with a decision to face reality directly. He gathered the paperwork, sat at his kitchen table, and went line by line through what had happened. The exercise was painful, reliving mistakes, missed opportunities, and overconfident decisions, but it was essential. By confronting the truth, he began to separate what had been within his control from what had not. He realized that part of his collapse had been bad timing, a market downturn that no one could have predicted. but much of it was self-inflicted. Overspending, chasing growth too quickly, ignoring warning signs. This clarity didn't erase the pain, but it gave him a map for the future. In the months that followed, he rebuilt his daily routine. Bankruptcy had left him exhausted and broken, but he knew that waiting for confidence to magically return would lead nowhere. Instead, he focused on building resilience through small, disciplined habits. Each morning, he wrote in a journal, recording not only what he had lost, but what he had learned. He exercised daily, treating physical health as a foundation for mental recovery. He reached out to mentors, not for sympathy, but for perspective. These conversations reminded him that many successful figures, from Henry Ford to Walt Disney, had also faced bankruptcy before achieving greatness. One of the hardest challenges was rebuilding trust. In business, trust is currency, and bankruptcy had drained from it. Banks refused to lend, investors wouldn't listen, and even potential partners hesitated to take meetings. To counter this, he decided to start small, focusing on opportunities that required little capital but promised visible results. He began offering consulting services in the industry he knew best. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't the empire he once envisioned, but it gave him two critical things: income and credibility. By solving problems for clients, he began to rebuild a reputation for competence and reliability. Slowly, word spread that while his first venture had collapsed, his expertise was still valuable. The humility of starting small became a cornerstone of his comeback. In the past, he had chased size and speed. This time, he pursued sustainability. Every decision was measured against the mistakes of the past. Debt was avoided. Expenses were scrutinized. Growth was pursued only when supported by real demand. Bankruptcy had taught him that rapid expansion without a foundation was nothing more than a house of cards. He vowed never to repeat that error. Adaptability also became one of his defining traits. In his first venture, he had clung stubbornly to his original vision, ignoring evidence that the market wanted something different. After bankruptcy, he learned to listen. He conducted surveys, interviewed potential customers, and tested ideas on a small scale before committing. When one project didn't work, he pivoted quickly, seeing the failure not as wasted effort, but as valuable information. This flexibility allowed him to identify opportunities that were hidden from others, precisely because he was willing to change course. One of those opportunities became the seed of his breakthrough. While consulting, he noticed a recurring problem across multiple clients, an inefficiency that no existing product solved effectively. Rather than rushing to build a large-scale company immediately, he began by designing a small prototype solution. He tested it with clients, refined it based on feedback, and slowly expanded. Because he had lived through collapse, he resisted the urge to scale recklessly. Instead, he grew deliberately, reinvesting profits rather than taking on massive debt. The discipline was hard, especially when investors began to show interest, but he remembered vividly what it felt like to sit in bankruptcy court. That memory guided every choice. Rebuilding wasn't just about money, it was about reshaping his identity. Bankruptcy had forced him to confront who he was when stripped of titles, assets, and prestige. For a time, he had equated self-worth with net worth. Losing everything forced him to see that his value wasn't in bank accounts or headlines, but in his resilience, creativity, and determination. This shift freed him from the fear of future failure. Once you've already lost it all and discovered that you can survive, the fear of losing again holds less power. The breakthrough came when his new company gained traction beyond his initial circle of clients. Demand grew steadily, then rapidly. Competitors took notice. Investors who had once ignored him now called eagerly. But unlike before, he didn't chase validation. He accepted investment only from partners who shared his vision and values. He protected the culture of his company fiercely, building a team grounded in trust, humility, and adaptability. Employees weren't just workers. They were collaborators in a mission shaped by hard-earned lessons. Years later, when his company reached national recognition and extraordinary financial success, he often reflected on bankruptcy as the turning point. Without that collapse, he admitted, he never would have developed the discipline, humility, and clarity that fueled his breakthrough. Bankruptcy was not the end of his story. It was the most important chapter of his education. For others facing setbacks, his journey offers practical lessons. First, face the truth. Denial prolongs pain. By confronting mistakes honestly, you create the foundation for growth. Second, build resilience through habits. Confidence doesn't return overnight, but small, consistent routines, journaling, exercise, learning, rebuild strength. Third, start small. Don't chase validation or image. Focus on delivering value and rebuilding credibility step by step. Fourth, stay adaptable. Pivot quickly when something doesn't work. Flexibility is resilience in action. Fifth, separate your identity from your circumstances. Bankruptcy or any failure is not who you are, it's what happened. Your worth lies in your ability to rise again. In America, bankruptcy law itself reflects this philosophy. It gives people a second chance, a chance to start fresh. Culturally, this aligns with the idea that resilience is more important than perfection. Failure is not a permanent mark, it is a test of character. And those who pass that test often emerge stronger than those who never stumbled at all. The entrepreneur in this case study proved that resilience is the ultimate competitive advantage. Competitors may have more resources, better timing, or luckier breaks, but resilience is what ensures survival. His bankruptcy stripped him of everything but left him with the one thing no creditor could touch, the will to rebuild. And from that will came a company, a legacy, and a lesson for us all. For anyone watching or reading this story, the message is clear. Bankruptcy or any failure is not the end of your life. It is the beginning of your reinvention. Your breakthrough may be hiding inside your breakdown, waiting for you to see it differently. If you are willing to confront reality, to start small, to adapt, and to persist, you too can transform collapse into comeback. This American story isn't just about business, it's about life. It's about the universal truth that resilience, more than talent or luck, is what defines ultimate success. The entrepreneur's bankruptcy could have ended him, but instead, it created him. And in that transformation lies the hope for anyone facing their own setbacks today. What feels like the end may be the very thing preparing you for the beginning of your greatest chapter. Bankruptcy is a word that can shatter confidence the moment it's spoken. It feels final, like a door slamming shut, a judgment handed down that says you failed. For the American entrepreneur at the center of our case study, bankruptcy was all of that and more. It was humiliating, exhausting, and terrifying. Yet it also became the spark that ignited a future breakthrough he never could have imagined in his early days of chasing success. Part 3 of this story examines not only how he rebuilt his career, but also how he rewrote his identity and legacy. More importantly, it explores how his choices reveal actionable lessons for anyone facing setbacks of their own. This isn't just a story of survival, it's a story of transformation that ends with a challenge for you to apply the same principles in your life. After his collapse, the entrepreneur entered a season of silence. Gone were the networking events, the magazine profiles, the congratulatory handshakes. What remained was debt, shame, and long nights staring at the ceiling. But silence can be fertile soil if you treat it as such. He used those quiet days to reflect deeply. Instead of rushing to start something new, he asked hard questions. Who had he been before bankruptcy? Why had he chased growth at the expense of stability? What did he truly value beyond financial success? These questions stripped away illusions and left behind something purer, a man who no longer needed applause to justify his existence. This inner shift marked the beginning of his comeback. He realized that his bankruptcy had been a kind of purification, burning off the arrogance and recklessness that had fueled his earlier downfall. With that awareness, he started making choices from a place of clarity rather than desperation. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. He only needed to build something meaningful, something sustainable, something that aligned with his values. The first stage of his return was small and deliberate. Instead of launching another ambitious venture right away, he looked for areas where his expertise could solve real problems. He found opportunities in consulting, helping other business owners avoid the mistakes he had once made. Ironically, the very thing that had nearly destroyed him, his bankruptcy, made him uniquely qualified to advise others. People trusted his guidance precisely because he had lived through collapse and could speak with authenticity. This unexpected shift in perspective turned what had been a weakness into a strength. From consulting, he began to notice patterns. Many of his clients struggled with the same inefficiencies he had once ignored. He started experimenting with solutions, testing them quietly with small groups before scaling up. Unlike his first company, this time he resisted the temptation to chase rapid growth. He remembered the suffocating weight of debt and chose instead to expand only when the foundation was strong. Every dollar earned was reinvested, every decision scrutinized for long-term sustainability. That patience, born from bankruptcy, became the defining difference between his past and his future. The resilience he demonstrated wasn't just practical, it was relational. He worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, not only with investors but also with family, employees and peers. Bankruptcy had shaken those bonds, but over time his consistency and humility mended them. He showed up, kept promises, delivered results, and gradually re-established himself as a man of integrity. This rebuilding of relationships was as important as rebuilding a business. For resilience is never just about systems, it is about people. Without their belief, no comeback can last. As the years passed, his second venture grew into something remarkable. What had begun as small consulting gigs evolved into a company recognized nationwide for its innovation. The very principles that had emerged from bankruptcy, discipline, humility, adaptability, became the company's DNA. Employees thrived under his leadership because he no longer ruled with ego. He invited input, encouraged experimentation, and cultivated a culture where mistakes were treated as lessons rather than punishments. Bankruptcy had once crushed him, but it also taught him how to build an environment where others could flourish without fear. When the company reached its breakthrough moment, landing a massive contract that catapulted it into the spotlight, the entrepreneur reflected not on the triumph, but on the journey. He knew that the applause was temporary, just as it had been before. What mattered was the resilience he had developed in the darkest chapter of his life. Bankruptcy had taught him that titles, profits, and praise could vanish overnight. What remained was character, and character, once forged in fire, could withstand anything. For those looking in from the outside, his story appeared to be a classic American comeback. Man loses everything, rebuilds, and rises to glory. But for him, the real victory was quieter. It was in the mornings when he woke without dread. It was in the meetings where he listened instead of dominating. It was in the satisfaction of knowing that his company was built on honesty, discipline, and value rather than illusion and ego. Those were the true breakthroughs, the ones no bankruptcy court could erase. This story holds profound lessons for anyone facing their own version of collapse. Perhaps you're not battling bankruptcy, but struggling with a failed project, a lost job, a broken relationship, or a dream that didn't materialize. Whatever the specifics, the principles remain the same. First, you must face reality with honesty. Denial only deepens the wound. Second, you must cultivate resilience through small, consistent habits, routines that stabilize your mind and body when everything feels uncertain. Third, you must start small, rebuilding credibility step by step rather than chasing grand gestures. Fourth, you must stay adaptable, willing to pivot when life pushes you in unexpected directions. And finally, you must separate your identity from your circumstances. Failure is what happened to you. It is not who you are. In America, the ability to start over after bankruptcy is enshrined in law, but the real power lies not in legislation, but in mindset. The entrepreneur we've followed shows that second chances only matter if you seize them. Bankruptcy could have been the final word in his story. Instead, he chose to rewrite it. That choice is available to you too. No matter how great the collapse, you can choose to see it not as the end, but as the beginning of your transformation. The resilience you build in these moments becomes your greatest asset. Money can be regained, reputations can be rebuilt, but resilience stays with you forever. It equips you for every future challenge, turning obstacles into stepping stones. The man who went from bankruptcy to breakthrough discovered this truth firsthand. Resilience is the ultimate wealth, and it cannot be taken from you. So here is the call to action. If you are facing a setback right now, stop seeing it as a verdict. Start seeing it as a classroom. Write down what went wrong, not to shame yourself, but to capture the lessons. Identify one small step you can take today to begin rebuilding. Share your struggle with someone you trust, because resilience grows stronger in community. And most importantly, refuse to let failure define you. Let it refine you. Your bankruptcy moment, whatever form it takes, can be the soil from which your breakthrough grows. You don't need to wait for permission, applause, or perfect conditions. You need only to begin, to persist, and to keep learning. The American entrepreneur whose story we've traced chose that path, and his life became a testament to the power of resilience. Now the choice is yours. If his journey inspires you, don't let it stop at inspiration. Turn it into action. Follow Think Fresh daily for more stories that challenge and encourage, like this video to support the message, and share it with someone in your life who needs to hear that bankruptcy or any failure is not the end. Because the truth is simple, resilience is available to all of us, and your breakthrough might be waiting on the other side of your greatest collapse.